Next up is Steve Sherfy and Jesse Wolfersberger from GroupM Next. GroupM Next was established in 2012 to be the forward-looking innovation unit of GroupM. They'll be discussing some very interesting research that they recently conducted about internet radio, who's listening, why it's so popular, and where the space may be moving in the near future. So here we go. Steve and Jesse.
Afternoon, everybody. Now, the first thing I'm always asked when I tell people I work at GroupM is, what in the world is GroupM? Well, it's a collection of several different agencies, including Mindshare, which has been mentioned today, MEC, Maxis, Mediacom, and a few other sister agencies that do other things. Now, GroupM Next, our purpose is really, like I said, is innovation, forward thinking. We exist to educate the agencies who then, in turn, educate their clients on what's coming, what's going to be next, and what they really need to be out there and looking for. So recently, we released some research around internet radio. I really liked David's presentation earlier, but I guess you could consider this to be kind of the counterpoint to what he may have been talking about with broadcast. We pulled out some of what we think is the most salient points for our meeting today, and our full white paper, if you're interested, is available on our website. So, just want to set the table for, I guess, the industry as a whole. Internet radio. It has grown a lot in the last several years, and if you really look at it, you see that big growth curve there really coincides with the adoption of mobile and smartphones. Now, we don't include broadcast in this because we know broadcast, it's well beyond the saturation point. It's been sitting at 90 to 95% of the population for several years now. You can't really get much bigger. Arbitron recently showed that about 45% of people have done or been exposed to internet radio or listened to internet radio. Our research showed about the same thing. We showed 35, eMarketers 42, so we all agree that we're hitting that halfway point when it comes to listeners of internet radio. Now, more importantly, though, is what's happening when it comes to the trade-off between broadcast, who's listening just broadcast, just internet, and the people that are sharing. So internet radio and radio in general, it's not really a zero-sum game. People are listening to both, but there is movement in those exclusive categories. In fact, over the last year, we had like a 5% movement year over year. People that are moving from just broadcast to just internet radio. So we see that, you know, the space is growing, and the space is growing, I believe, mostly among, you know, your 18 to 34, your younger generation. They're the ones that are moving just to internet, just like they're the ones that are moving just to streaming. My son, 24, he doesn't own any kind of cable box. He's never had any kind of paid TV service. He is almost exclusively Netflix and YouTube. And the younger generation, same kind of thing. They're moving just to these digital formats. It's just a lot easier for them. They're the digital generation. So if we look at the time that's being spent with internet radio, we show in our research that about 13, almost 14 hours a week is what people are listening. Arbitron and eMarketer, they're a little lower than that, but it's still a significant amount of time that people are spending every week listening to internet radio. So I guess to put that in perspective, we can look at, say, television. So 31 hours is what people are spending watching television. And it's kind of funny because eMarketer also a couple weeks ago came out with a stat that for the first time ever, time spent with digital is going to surpass time spent with TV in 2013. So it's just that whole shift of digital. But if we want to compare it to something else, let's say social. That's been huge for the last couple of years. There's so much money that's being moved into the social space. But if we look at this, according to what we're showing, and even what eMarketer shows, you have at least 2 times more time is being spent in internet radio than is being spent on social sites. And we know the kind of time that people are spending there. So it shows that that market it's just really opening up. It's getting bigger and bigger as more people are not only exposed to it, but moving to it exclusively. And of course, naturally, like with all things, ad spend is way out of balance, incredibly out of balance. So television. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to the ratio of spend in television to internet radio? Throw out a number. Close. We're actually almost 200 to 1. Now, granted, okay, that's expected. Television, it's the giant. It's always going to be the giant, just like broadcast radio. It's huge, and it'll remain big. So let's take it, say, just to broadcast radio. Let's compare it. What's our ratio of spend in broadcast radio to internet radio? 50 to 1, 80 to 1, 45 to 1. So not quite that big, but still, it's still big. So we look at television, we look at radio to radio. So let's narrow it down to a digital field. How about just digital? So let's look at a spend of social media compared to internet radio. Anybody want to throw out a number there? 30 to 1. Not quite, but it's still, we're 14 to 1, so we still are way out of whack as far as time spent to money that brands are spending. And a lot of it comes from brands just don't know why they should spend the money in internet radio. Is it a viable thing? But we know people are spending their time with it. People are adopting it to look at it exclusively. So it's a viable marketplace. So Jesse's going to talk to us about, why are people loving this area?
Sure. Testing, 1, 2. Nothing. Haha. Hello. So one of the things we like to do, we love to do research. We love to do all this quantitative research, but I want to get out of the ones and zeros for a second, and I want to kind of get to the qualitative. Why do people love it? There's been a lot of talk today about digital and traditional and the different shifts. Let's just kind of get into the warm, fuzzy feelings here for a second. We asked 1,000 people, so this is brand new, by the way. This is not in the paper. How do you feel about broadcast radio? Give us a few words. Here's a word cloud that describes the most common answers. So we see a lot of very good things up here. We see good, like, love, okay, listen. We see some maybe negative things. Too many. I think I know what they're talking about there. Commercials, which is also a big thing here. So that's kind of a general sentiment feeling around broadcast radio. One of the things I love to do when we give these open-ended questions, I don't know if anyone's taken one of these online surveys before, but you can just put in one word if you want and go to the next slide. That's fine. But I love the people that will sit there and type out a whole paragraph and let us know, like, just the full thing. So I want to pull out a few of those because I just love them. This person said, would be better with less commercials and without hearing the same songs over and over. So I think you kind of catch on to one of the general sentiments about broadcast radio, which is, commercials and kind of repetitiveness. Here's another one. Unless you have a good station nearby, irrelevant to you. So this is kind of an interesting sentiment here where we talk about location, and you know what? The same Pandora I get in California is the same one I get in Florida, the same one I get in St. Louis, where we're from. Not so much in broadcast, and maybe that's a positive, maybe it's a negative, depending on who you are. This person says, it's great, like Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, LOL. So they're great, I suppose. So there's still a very positive feeling around broadcast overall. Let's kind of compare that now. We asked the same question about Pandora Radio. So we could use a lot of different internet radio stations, but Pandora is the market leader, so we're just going to go with that one for now. This is the word cloud you get out of that. So a lot of the same words, but I think the sizes are a little bit different. The first word that pops out is love. And good and great and okay and like some of the same things. Look, commercials and ads are still some of the words in here. I don't know if the back room can see it, but they're still there. They're just a lot smaller. Let's pull out some more of those verbatim responses that I love so much. This person says, it's great to be able to listen to the music you want to hear instead of most of the direct on local commercial stations. So I think that catches one of the main feelings, one of the main reasons people are kind of moving into internet is the customized stations and the ability to program your own stations. Here's the downside of that. This person said this, they don't really get me, and I don't get a mix of songs that I normally prefer. So this is kind of impossible, right? It's impossible for that to be less customizable than broadcast, but the expectations are different. Once you show me that you can program a station to me, my expectations of what that's going to be are very high. So if you don't meet that, you're going to get some negative responses like this. And this person says, I wish it and Spotify would have a baby. So I think, yeah, we got to clap over there. So I think this maybe shows there's different aspects of the different types of radio, and Slacker and Songza and everybody else that's here. There's different qualities and different strengths and weaknesses all around. let's compare these two for a second. So here's the two word clouds we had here. I think seeing them side to side, you really get a sense of, broadcast, people still have very favorable reviews of broadcast, and people still listen a whole lot of it. But Pandora, people love it. Like, if you are into it, you're really into it. The word commercials, like I said, some of that is a lot smaller in the second one, and just that word love is just so much bigger there. Here's a bonus point for you. We asked about the new iTunes radio, which is apparently launching this week after many years of rumors. Here's the word cloud we got about that. So this is a lot different than the other two. We got a lot of people who said interested. A lot of people that said don't care. A lot of people that said good, don't know. There's a lot of questions. What is iTunes radio going to be? We've got cool, great, excited. So I think you have a really mixed response around this new iTunes radio and if this is in fact going to be a big competitor to some of the big guys out there now. Here's some more verbatim responses for you. I will almost certainly use iTunes radio more than I use Spotify, since it will probably be easier to use and more integrated. Again, I love that this person took the time to type that whole thing out when they could have just said okay and moved on. But yeah, I think that kind of catches one of the big sentiments here, is that the integration, the fact that if you are in Apple, if you're in that ecosystem, you know it's going to work well with all your devices, between the devices, all that. So that's one of the big pros for iTunes Radio. Here's the downside of that. I don't like anything from Apple. I'm not a mindless sheep. So I think no matter what, you're going to get people who are sort of anti-Apple, and they'll never use iTunes Radio, and that's probably just okay with Apple. But you're definitely going to get that big polarization for sure. And this person says, I can't wait, like, my god, swiggity swag.
Okay, by my teenage daughter, that's Ermagerd.
Yeah, Ermagerd. So that's the upside. The Apple fanboys, they're going to adopt anything Apple immediately. So I think that's what you're going to get there. In our survey, we did this. We asked people, this was before we had any details about Apple iTunes Radio at all. We said, hey, Apple's coming out with this product. It's been rumored for a long time. Will you switch from your current favorite radio station, your current favorite internet radio provider, to Apple Radio? 34% said yes. They had no details at all, other than the fact it was made by Apple. 34% said, yep, I'm switching. Of people who said that Pandora was their favorite current station or the current provider, 46% said they would leave for Apple. Spotify, that number was 47. iHeartRadio was 46. Slacker was over 50%. So who knows if this is actually true? The product is not released yet. We'll see if when the rubber meets the road, if this is actually going to be the case. But I think it gets you a case that this could be a game changer. You know what? It could be just an overhyped thing from Apple that doesn't really end up making the impact that a lot of people thought it will, or it could be huge and it could cut half the audience from some of the big players in the game today. So we shall see. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Steve. There you go.
So who are these people that we're all after, both in broadcast and in internet radio? Who are they? What makes up the demographics? Well, we conclude that these people are a very, very desirable set for brands. They're affluent, they don't avoid ads, and they purchase more. So, making a statement, let's back this up a little bit. So, when we did our research, we found that there's really two distinct groups that came across. There was the primary, traditional, or broadcast people, and no insult to radio for showing that kind of radio. And then there's the avid internet users, the people that are, are true digital people. So, these two groups, there's a very distinct difference that we found with these two groups. So first, they both make about the same amount of money. Not much of a difference there, okay? Education. They both have about the same level of education. So now you're thinking, Steve, you're lying to me. These are the same people. The problem, or the difference comes in right here, is the avid internet users reached these milestones 13 years earlier than their primary traditional counterparts. So we're talking 13 more years of buying power. We're talking a younger audience, a more affluent audience. These are the people that, a good comparison. There's about that much of a difference between me and Jesse. I have a lot more bills than Jesse does. I actually have a couple houses. I have 3 kids, one in college, one that's going to be in college on the way, and one that's going to kill me before she gets to college. And just more expenses, more things that we do. Jesse, married just, what, 4 or 5 years?
Yep.
And just had a baby. Congrats, Jesse. Beautiful little girl. But, you know, nowhere near the expenses.
You're saying it gets worse?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I'll give you a list, dude. So he represents that subset. He has reached those milestones before I have and has a lot more disposable income. That's our avid internet audience. They are a brand's dream, especially since they can be targeted through that internet radio space a lot more micro than you can do on broadcast. Broadcast does a great job, just like traditional TV, of, you know, targeting and segmenting, but nothing beats that, hey, I'm going to send an ad to Bob, and just to Bob with this specific message. So, again, you know, outlining some more about how there are ideal targets. 86%. What is that? Those are the percentage of people that have never paid for an internet radio service. They have the free ad-based versions, the ad-based of Pandora, the ad-based of Spotify. Those are the ones that are seeing those ads that brands are sending out there. 1/3. 1/3 of these people, they don't mind the advertising. They're saying to brands, hey, I want this ad-based service, and I don't mind the ads that you're sending to me. Hey, send them all day. It's cool. I don't mind. 17%. This is that percentage of those people that they're less likely to avoid an advertisement. When they're listening to Pandora, the ad's coming on. They're listening to it. They're not avoiding it. Like, say, in my group, when I'm in my car listening to broadcast radio, I like the music. I identify with the music. I don't want to hear commercials. When a commercial comes on, I push a button. I go to another station. These people are so much less likely to do that. Also, the biggest thing, 2 times. They are 2 times more likely to make a purchase after hearing a radio ad. So, in a nutshell, we have a group here that's younger, more affluent, more disposable income, in a system where they're seeing more ads, they won't avoid the ads, and they're much more likely to take an action and to make a purchase after hearing those ads. I mean, you sit all those stats down in front of any brand, I don't see how anyone would not say, yes, sign me up, how can I get to those people?
So I think once the radio becomes as easy as it is to just press a button and start listening, that's when we'll really see this jump in the hours listened, and we'll start to see the sort of tear away of some of that broadcast, that 95%. So, show of hands, how many people right now listen to internet radio in their car by plugging in their phone and the auxiliary input, something like that? Wow, a lot of people, great. I'm definitely one of them. That's kind of hard to do. I mean, it's not that hard to do, but as compared to just pressing on, it certainly takes a little bit more effort. So once that becomes the same of on for Pandora or Slacker or Spotify or whatever, that's going to be the game changer. So we did a couple of really interesting survey questions here. One of the things we did with this, we took half of our sample and showed them this car. Said, here's your car, here's your specs. Are you interested in buying this car? Took the second half of our panel, showed them this car. Same car, same specs, had in-dash digital radio. So for all you researchers out there, you never want to show them both and say, hey, which would you rather have, because everyone would take the one on the right, right? But if you just show half the people the one on the left, half the people the one on the right, then you can say, find out what that true lift is. And the lift was this, 14%. So 14% more of the car on the right just because it had that in-dash digital radio. I don't know if anyone's bought a car recently. I've bought a car recently, and I was sitting there arguing over, $200-300 of a, very expensive car. So the fact that you can get 14% more people walking in the door if it has an in-dash digital radio, that's pretty big. I think that's why we see this big explosion. We did this too. You're going to buy a car, and you can only have one of the following options, and assume that there are no price differences. This is what it came out to be. Navigation system was number 1. Sunroof number 2. In-dash internet radio was number 3. Heated seats number 4. Backup camera number 5. So those are the top 5 things that the options they would take if there was no price difference. Pretty interesting by itself, right? In-dash internet radio number 3. The story gets way more interesting when you do this. Of ages 18 to 34, number 1. They'll take it over anything else. Of ages 35 and older, number 5. So when I showed you the first one and it said, yeah, it's number 3, that's really just averaging 1 in 5. So this is where things get really interesting, because that group on the left, once they start buying more cars, once people on the right, stop walking the earth, sorry. But once they kind of start going away, that in-dash internet radio is going to be really interesting and really the game changer. And that's why we're going to see this. Look, eMarketer says that by 2016, we're going to have 40 million connected car shipments worldwide as compared to only 8 million in 2012. And that's why you see every auto manufacturer in existence today has some sort of agreement to have one of these in. So Steve showed you this graph as the first slide here. I'm going to bring it back up. Look, we know that traditional broadcast radio is sort of up in that 90%. It's off the scale of this chart. And internet radio is kind of headed the right direction. But once everyone can hit a button in their car and turn on Pandora the same way they can turn on their local radio station, I think that's where we may see some of that competition really coming in. So with that, we got just a couple minutes here. We can kind of flow through these. I'm not even going to go through these because I want to take questions. So, questions? Yes. Yes, we will make them available. I don't know how we can do that, but we will do it. So, yes. Slideshare. Thoughts?
Well, honestly, we didn't ask that directly, but I think, since the advent of the DVR, we've kind of been training people to do that. And so people that, didn't like commercials in the first place, they now have that option. I don't think there's a lift in it between, people that were doing it before in broadcast. I don't think they're doing it more. But, there's people that are just yeah. Yeah, there is that too, but we're saying that the avid internet users, they're less likely to avoid those advertisements. Yes,
it's tough to tell. I mean, we basically ask the question when an audio ad comes on, are you going to attempt to skip it? And that first group was 17% less than the internet group. So whatever the case may be, whether it's a better targeted ad or maybe it's harder to skip Pandora ads, whatever the case may be, it's less.
Hi. Ooh, works. I was just curious, the bucket sizes, the universes, it's assumed that you're either an avid broadcast listener or you're an avid internet listener. Does that align, or did you see a lot of overlap? Because a lot of times people like music and they can go both ways. And then, in follow-up,
sure.
Size of buckets, meaning what percentage of people fell into avid broadcast listener versus percentage of the universe that fell into avid internet listener?
So this is probably a disappointing answer for you, but we split it in half. So we chose a halfway point, and we said 500 that way, 500 that way. And that's kind of how we made our groups. So, like I said, hopefully not disappointing. But yeah, we just kind of chose that middle ground of where it splits off. And it ended up being about 20%. So if you listen to about 20% of your overall audio time with digital, then you're at the 50th percentile of sort of internet usage.
Okay, and we've got time for one more quick question if someone's got one that's prompt.
I'll make it quick. Did you make any distinction in your research between broadcast streaming and just standard pure play streaming?
Kind of. So, again, hopefully this is not a disappointing question. We're limited in terminology by the survey takers. If I asked a bunch of marketers and I put pure play, podcasting, streaming, all these things, they may know the difference. But if I'm asking the general pop, they really only know broadcast with like the numbers or something I play on my phone. So not really. We're kind of lumping all things digital into one and all things traditional in the other because we're kind of limited by the terminology and the sort of sophistication of the general population.
But also in the questions that we had that dealt with services specifically, all the named services that we offered as choices were ones that were strictly internet radio, not streaming from live stations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.